Welcome to Mystery Cafe, your ultimate stop for gripping detective stories, chilling mysteries, and unforgettable investigations. Here, every video serves a fresh dose of suspense, shocking twists, and cases that challenge your inner detective. From classic whodunits to modern crime stories, we bring the world of mystery straight to your screen, where every clue matters and no secret stays buried for long. Before we start unraveling today's mystery, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa. Drop your country, city, or stay in the comments, and let's see how far the Mystery Cafe family reaches. Magnifying glass tilted right.
The Orchid Room Murder. Chapter 1, Orchid Ashes. I was halfway through a plate of corned beef at Rusterman's when the maitre d', looking like somebody had swapped his starch for battery acid, slid up to my table and whispered, "Mr. Goodwin, he needs you. Now. You work for a certain extremely sedentary genius long enough and he can only mean one person." I didn't ask what this need business was about. I wiped my mouth, tossed a buck down, and walked 4 blocks to 35th Street with a knot in my gut that didn't belong to the corned beef. By the time I let myself into the brownstone, I could hear his voice from the plant rooms. That voice, for the record, was not designed for excitement. It was meant for issuing decrees, demanding silence, and ordering beer. The fact that it was raised, even by a notch, qualified as a 5-alarm situation. I hustled up to the roof level. The air was humid and sweet, all orchids and warm mist and money. He was there, planted in a chair instead of his usual rolling stool, one hand gripping the armrest tight enough to make the leather complain, eyes locked on a corner bench like it had personally betrayed him. On the bench lay a body. Female. Mid-30s. Dark hair, expensive suit, pearls that were either genuine or a very good lie. Barefoot. Throat bruised. He turned his head toward me without getting up. Movement is rationed with him the way the government rations good scotch during wartime. His face was a controlled furnace. "Archie," he said, voice low, "shut the door." I shut the door. I also slid the bolt, because when a dead woman appears in your orchid rooms during the sacred 4 to 6 p.m. plant session, you don't assume you're going to have a normal evening. "Tell me you didn't do it," I said. His eyes narrowed. "Pfui. Good. That'll play better with the DA." He exhaled through the nose. "She arrived at 3:58. I was here with Theodore." She introduced herself as Miss Lillian Vance. She said it was urgent, and that it couldn't be discussed in the office downstairs. He paused. She was agitated and perspiring. "I do not tolerate perspiration up here." "Tragic," I said. "And now she's dead." She was alive when Theodore and I left to fetch a specific hybrid for demonstration. He shut his eyes for a beat, which for him is the same as another man screaming and punching drywall. We returned at 4:11. She was as you see. I stepped closer to the body, crouched, and took inventory. No obvious stab wound. No gunshot. The bruising along the neck was mottled, high, and uneven. Fingers. Someone had cut off her hair. But here's something else. Under her right hand, pinched between the fingertips, was a scrap of paper. Not clenched, placed. Angled so you couldn't miss it unless you were blind or uninterested. I used my handkerchief and plucked it. The note said, "Ask him about Marshfield." That was all. I looked at him. "You want to tell me who Marshfield is, or do we want to play guess the blackmailer while the cops inventory our wallpaper?" "I do not know any Marshfield," he said. "That's so." "Yes," he said, and his tone had that iron plate in it, the one that says he is neither lying nor in the mood to be doubted. "All right." I pocketed the note. "Where's Theodore now?" I asked. "In his room, hyperventilating and swearing that he never touched her," he said. Which is both true and unhelpful. Anyone else in the house? No clients. No deliveries. Fritz is downstairs in the kitchen, proving that veal can be poetry. He has not come up. Door locks? Engaged after she entered, disengaged only when you arrived, he said. Nobody has left. Which meant what it always means in bad mystery theater, the killer was almost certainly still inside. I stood. Okay, I said. Here's the situation. We have a corpse in the worst possible room. We have an alleged stranger who died holding a note accusing you of secrets. We have no witnesses, except us, and we don't count. We have your personal horticultural heaven now qualifying as a crime scene. And in about 20 minutes, we're going to have Inspector Kramer pounding on the door like the landlord in an overdue musical. His jaw flexed. Kramer, he muttered, like the name left grit in his mouth. Yeah. I'll call him, I said. He shot me a glare that could have boiled sap. No, you will not. With respect, I said, I like my license. And I like not being arraigned as accessory after the fact. We require time, he said. For what? To understand Marshfield, he said simply. Which, if you've worked with him as long as I have, you know translates to, I am not letting the police get here before I have leverage. I checked my watch. I did some fast math. If I stalled, and if Kramer didn't already have someone tailing me from Rusterman's, maybe we'd get 10 minutes. 12 if the traffic on 35th was ugly. You get 8, I said. After that, I'm dialing. Archie, he said. Yeah. Find Marshfield. Sure, I said lightly. Any first name, last name, city of residence, favorite cigar, social club, blood type, anything like that? Archie, he said again, more quietly. He killed her in my house. That was all. But it was enough. I nodded once, turned, and went to start digging. Chapter 2, The Man Who Wasn't There. First stop, her purse. The late Miss Lillian Vance had gone upscale on leather. The bag alone probably cost more than my suit, and I don't buy cheap suits. Inside, wallet, pressed handkerchief, keys on a brass ring with a lion's head charm, lipstick, compact, no weapon, no cigarettes, no matches, and one folded contract envelope with her name printed neatly in block caps. No clutter. No receipts. Either she was unnaturally tidy or she'd cleaned herself before she came over, which is something nervous people do when they know they're going someplace important and don't want to leave a trail. The wallet gave me ID, which matched the name she'd given. Address, East 62nd, near the park. That meant money or at least access to somebody else's. Also 2 credit cards, both business accounts, both marked Vance Consulting Group. Consulting, sure. People who consult tend to also know where the bodies are buried, sometimes in a very literal sense. There was also a typed card tucked behind her driver's license. The card had one line. Marshfield equals insulation. That wasn't helpful unless we planned to redo the attic. I heard footsteps and turned. He had hauled himself upright, which is an event. He doesn't do upright unless the building is on fire or the beer has been moved. His face was flushed in a way that said fury was costing him blood pressure points. Insulation, he repeated. Show me. Insulation, he repeated. Show me. I handed him the card. He stared at it like it was an arithmetic error. Could be a product, I offered. Could be a company. Could be a man who sells insulation. Could be a code word for something that keeps heat from getting out. He grunted. Or in. That was fair. Did she say anything before you left her alone? Yes, he said. She said, he'll come after me. If he thinks I talk to you, he'll come after me here. But that's why I came here. He wouldn't dare do anything to you. His voice went flat. She miscalculated. Yeah, I said. And now I get to tell Kramer that an unknown, he strangled her upstairs while you nipped off to look at flowers. Archie. Attending, I said. She was frightened, he said, choosing the word like it offended him. It was genuine. She was also angry. That combination is rare. Fear dilutes anger, or anger suffocates fear. She retained both. Which suggests the man she called Marshfield is not merely dangerous but insulting. Insulting how? To her intelligence, he said. I nodded. Someone who thought she was an errand girl, not a partner. Yes. So who hires a woman like this and then treats her like a stenographer? Men who consider themselves indispensable, he said. Men with resources. He was right. She had money on her, but not possession money. Visible money. Presentation money. The kind you wear so you look like you belong at a table you clawed your way to. I had seen it before. Girlfriends of mid-tier racketeers. Wives of magnates who weren't invited to the first marriage. Personal assistants of men who wanted the world to assume they were noble patrons. Could be political, I said. Could be industrial, he said. We were warming up nicely. I snapped photos, body, bruising, purse contents, because memories are good but evidence is better. Then I headed downstairs. Fritz was in the kitchen, wearing his white apron and an expression you usually only see on men who have discovered an insect in their cognac. Archie, he whispered, he said I am not to go upstairs. Correct, I said. Stay put. Also, nobody comes in. If the doorbell rings, you are suddenly French and incapable of English. He frowned. I am Swiss. Tonight you're flexible, I said. Any calls in the last hour? No, he said. The telephone has been mute. All right. You're doing great. Keep the veal warm. There's an even chance you're feeding homicide cops before dessert. He made a face like I'd suggested he pan-fry gravel. From there, I hit the office. My desk, my chair, my phone, my responsibility to keep us out of handcuffs. I dialed Lon Cohen at the Gazette. Lon likes to pretend we're just two old pals chatting. In exchange, he occasionally leaks me background before the city does. Cohen, he said. Archie. You ever hear of an insulation outfit with the name Marshfield? I said. Lon paused a beat. I could hear him fishing through mental clippings. Marshfield, you mean Marshfield Industrial Materials? They've been in the papers lately. State contracts, infrastructure retrofits, that sort of thing. Big money. Real cozy with procurement boards. Why? Who runs it? Officially? A board. Unofficially? He let out a low whistle. That'd be Charles R. Marshfield. Old construction money. Thinks labor law is a suggestion. You're messing in heavy lanes, pal. Any scandal I should know about? Besides paying off inspectors and burying asbestos violations under consulting reports that say, all clear? Lon said. There's chatter he's angling for some federal disaster relief rebuild contracts. Allegations of kickbacks. Nothing proven. Yet. Consulting reports. I looked at the card I'd swiped from Miss Vance's wallet. Vance Consulting Group. Lon, I said quietly, you ever hear of a woman named Lillian Vance? Another pause. Yeah, he said slowly. Yeah, actually. She shows up on filings as an independent environmental compliance consultant. Word is she's Marshfield's fixer. If a site fails inspection, she makes the numbers sing lullabies. Rumor says she used to work inside, then spun off her own shop a year ago but still does exclusive work for him. Why? What's going on? Lon, I said, you are a handsome fountain of civic knowledge and I'll buy you lunch to prove it. Right now I gotta go. Go where? I hung up. So. Our dead woman used to work for Charles Marshfield, construction baron and insulation mogul with a fondness for skirting regulation. She consulted on compliance issues. She got scared enough to come to us. She told the big man upstairs that someone would come after her. And somebody had. That gave us pressure. That gave us motive. That gave us a suspect. It also gave us a problem. Because if Charles Marshfield thought he could march an errand boy into the brownstone and have a body dropped in the orchid rooms like a calling card, then we weren't just in trouble. We were in a war. Chapter 3, Kramer rings the bell. At 8 minutes and change, I went back upstairs and informed him that my conscience had union rules. He closed his eyes, nodded once, and said, "Call." So I did. When Inspector Kramer arrived with Sergeant Pulley Stebbins in tow, the front door frame almost cracked from the impact. Fritz's veal never had a chance. Kramer stomped in like a linebacker who'd been benched too long. He smelled like cigar smoke, municipal budget stress, and rain. His jaw was set in that bulldog way that suggests he is about 5 heartbeats from naming you personally responsible for crime in the state of New York. "Where," he said, "is it?" "Not her. It." That told me plenty. "Upstairs in the plant rooms," I said. "And before you have a ceremony about contamination, we touched as little as possible." He swung on me. "You think I don't know how careful you two get when there's leverage to be found? If there was a postage stamp under that body you steamed it off and filed it alphabetically." "Inspector," I said, wounded, "you cut me." "Not yet," he said darkly. "Take me up." Pulley gave me a look like a disappointed uncle and lumbered behind us. He always looks like that. With him it's genetic. Now, if you're thinking that introducing homicide cops into 2,000 square feet of temperature-controlled, custom-humidified, fan-balanced tropical orchid heaven is the sort of event that causes shouting, yes. Yes, it is. Stay on the rubber runners, I told them. You step on anything green that isn't supposed to be dead already, we'll have to grow you a new spleen in court. We reached the room. He was seated again, which means he'd reached his physical limit for the day or his patience limit for the decade. Possibly both. He inclined his head by maybe an inch. Kramer stopped cold at the sight of the body. His expression didn't change, but something sharpened in his posture. He's seen plenty of corpses. But he hadn't seen one up here before. That carried weight. "Name," Kramer grunted. "Lillian Vance," I said. "Consultant. Midtown office. Lives on East 62nd. I have the wallet to prove it, it's in my desk, untouched since I pulled it so you couldn't accuse us of theft. She arrived around 4. She was alive. She requested a private meeting. There was a short interval of absence. She was then discovered deceased." Kramer flicked his eyes to him. "That match your story?" "Yes," he said. Kramer said. He crouched, gracefully for a man his size, and examined the bruising on her neck. Manual strangulation. No surprise. Whoever did it had meat on him. This isn't dainty. Pulley, get the doc up here, and tell the boys downstairs to put booties over their damn shoes. Nobody touches a leaf unless it's on the corpse. Pulley nodded and lumbered out. Kramer straightened and looked at me. "Time of death?" "Between 4:03 and 4:11 by house timeline," I said. "Call it within that window." "That's tight," he said. "We run a taut ship," I said. He grunted. "Any witnesses?" "Just us and the orchids," I said. "No visitors?" he asked. "No," he said from his chair. The door remained locked after Miss Vance entered. Mr. Goodwin arrived at approximately 4:20, at which point I unlocked it for him. Prior to that, only internal movement. Kramer turned on me. Internal movement. Meaning him, Theodore, and the deceased, I said. Plus whoever decided to improvise garrote-less strangulation. Kramer's forehead creased. Theodore was up here too? Yeah, I said. But don't get excited. Theodore wouldn't bruise a banana without apologizing in tears. Kramer pointed a finger at me. You don't get to pre-clear suspects. Then don't ask open questions, I said. He puffed like his cigar had lit itself inside his throat. Listen, wise guy. We've stretched patience with your employer for years. We tolerate him playing genius because half the time it closes cases and makes us look good. But this is a new neighborhood. This lady wasn't shot in an alley in the village. She is dead upstairs in your private hothouse like a butterfly on a pin. So unless I get cooperation so clean it squeaks, I am hauling both of you downtown, sealing this mausoleum, and letting the press chew on it. There it was. The threat. It didn't surprise me. It did, however, ice the room a few degrees. He lifted one eyebrow, which on him is equivalent to another man flipping a table. Inspector. We have always, in the end, cooperated. In the end, Kramer said. We ain't at the end. Then indulge me, he said. Do you know Charles Marshfield? Kramer blinked. It wasn't dramatic, but it was there. Why, he said. Because Miss Vance, he said, gesturing at the body with one thick finger, informed us that a certain he had threatened her. She further implied that he would regard this house as sacrosanct. Her note, he looked at me. I produced the slip that had been between her fingers. I had already photographed it, so if Kramer decided to misplace it, we'd still own a copy. He took it and read. Ask him about Marshfield. Kramer stared at it for a slow 3 count. Then he swore under his breath. So you do know Marshfield, I said. I know of him, Kramer snapped. Is he in construction? I asked innocently. Insulation? State contracts? Compliance issues? Friendly with inspectors? Kramer gave me a look that said if I kept talking I'd be giving my statement downtown in my socks. He turned back to him. What did she tell you before she died? Essentially nothing of substance, came the reply. She stated that a man she called Marshfield had for some time been procuring fraudulent environmental compliance certifications and safety clearances for multiple industrial rehabilitation projects, among them several structures designated for emergency habitation after disasters. She claimed to have assisted in that fraud. She further claimed to be in possession of proof sufficient to ruin him. She believed Mr. Marshfield had discovered her intent to make use of said proof. She came here out of a belief that my notoriety would protect her. His mouth tightened. An error. Kramer stared. That's nothing of substance. For my standards, he said. And where, Kramer said slowly, is this proof? That was the question. I opened both hands. If you find it, let us know. We'll embroider throw pillows. Kramer glared. So she had blackmail material on a man with enough political friends to pave Midtown in gold, and she walked in here and now she's dead. And you two sat alone with her corpse for, how long? 10 minutes? 15? Long enough to not find the evidence. Do I look like a sap to you? Yes, I said. Frequently. Pulley came back, which saved me from being arrested for accuracy. Doc's on his way up, Pulley said. And there's reporters across the street already. Kramer swore. Of course there are. He rounded on me again. All right. Here's how this is gonna run. Until my boys are done dusting and bagging, nobody leaves. Not you, not him, not the cook, not the plant wrangler. We're pulling phone records. We're talking to that Gazette parasite you like. We are going to peel this house like an onion. And after that? I asked. After that, Kramer said, if I don't have something solid to explain why this woman got choked to death under your roof, I start breaking things you two care about. He meant the orchids. He didn't have to say it. We all heard it. I felt the room go still. Very quietly, very calmly, he said, Inspector. If you injure so much as a petal, I will dedicate the remainder of my days to dismantling your career molecule by molecule. That was not a threat. That was logistics. Kramer's lip curled. You assume, he said, that you'll still have days. So yes. We were now officially in a war. Chapter 4, Miss Vance's Ghost. We were detained. That's the polite phrasing. Less polite phrasing involves words Pulley would pretend not to hear. Technicians swarmed the plant rooms in paper booties and gloves, snapping photos, bagging fibers, taking tape lifts from every surface like the leaves might be conspirators. The medical examiner's man did his routine, neck, hyoid, petechiae, time of death estimate that matched ours within the window. Body removal was careful, almost apologetic. Even Kramer knew better than to risk brushing against so much as a cymbidium without permission. Still, the air up there felt wrong once she was gone. Like something had been ripped out of the room that wasn't her, exactly. More like equilibrium. Downstairs, Fritz brewed coffee that could have revived pharaohs and set out veal in silence. Kramer didn't touch the veal. That alone tells you the night was grim. Pulley parked in the office with me, just out of arm's reach of the phone, like I was a teenager and the handset was contraband. He didn't say much. He rarely does. He just sat there filling the room with his sighs and the unspoken message that if I bolted he would plant me through the floorboards like a fence post. Upstairs, Kramer and the big man had what you might call a conversation. With anyone else you'd call it an interrogation, but words bend in that room. While we were in holding pattern, I tried to do the thing Miss Vance had begged for, understand what she'd been ready to unload. Let's line it out. 1. She worked, officially or not, for Marshfield Industrial Materials, which Lon said was neck-deep in state infrastructure retrofits and emergency housing rehab contracts. Disaster relief dollars. Post-fire, post-flood, post-collapse work. When a building somewhere gave up and pancaked, Marshfield showed up waving stamped blueprints and said, "We'll make it safe. We'll make it livable." 2. Livable costs money. Not just labor and timber, but the boring stuff nobody puts in brochures: insulation, venting, sealant, mold remediation, asbestos abatement, structural reinforcement against future failure. All those little invisible things with ugly acronyms that determine if a family of 4 wakes up tomorrow or doesn't wake up at all. 3. If you cut corners on those things and then file false reports that say you didn't, congratulations, you just turned desperate displaced tenants into test subjects. You also saved yourself a mountain of cash. 4. Lillian Vance said she had proof. Proof he'd falsified compliance. Proof he'd bribed inspectors. Proof he'd signed off on structures people were already living in. That meant leverage. Real leverage. The kind that gets federal prosecutors out of bed. That also meant motive to silence her. Fast. Okay. So why us? Not the morality angle. She wasn't here for absolution. She was here for protection. She believed her safest physical coordinates on planet Earth at 4 p.m. would be the orchid rooms of the man upstairs. Because who would dare? Answer: whoever killed her dared. That told me 2 things. First, Marshfield or his boy, if we assume it was his boy, had either ice water guts or believed they had enough pull to bulldoze any fallout. That smells like money plus friends in high offices. Second, the killer knew our layout. You don't just casually stroll upstairs, dodge Fritz, thread through the hall, find the plant rooms, slip inside during a 4-minute window, choke a woman who's presumably not trying to cooperate with that plan, and leave without tracking mud or leaving a scream unless you've rehearsed the route. And that was the part that made my neck itch. Because however arrogant a hired gorilla might be, he doesn't usually get a guided tour of our home base ahead of time. Which means either, A, he'd been here before on legitimate business, long enough to learn the geography, or, B, someone had mapped it for him. Option B was unpleasant to consider. Thinking hard, Archie? Pulley rumbled. Thinking medium, I said. Thinking hard's for taxpayers. He snorted, which from him is practically stand-up comedy. Tell me something, I said. You ever seen Marshfield up close? Pulley rolled a shoulder. Couple hearings. He's one of those thick silver men. Polished. You know the type. Hair looks poured, smile looks carved, suit looks like it cost more than my car. Talks with that calm voice. Like nothing's urgent because everyone jumps when he says jump. So, charming. He's the kind of guy, Pulley said, who'll shake your hand and make you feel like you ought to thank him for stealing your wallet. I said. You talked to him tonight? Pulley gave me the cop stare. Who said we talked to him tonight? Nobody, I said. That why you did? He grunted and looked away, which was as good as a signed affidavit. So. Kramer had already reached out. That meant speed. That also meant Marshfield, wherever he was, already knew Lillian Vance had died in our house. Which, in turn, meant he was already workshopping a version of events that did not end with his arraignment. I leaned back and let my eyes half close. Here's a thing I've learned. If you sit very still in your own office while the cops pretend you're under arrest without technically saying it, useful memories come back. Like, for instance, a small detail from earlier, when I'd checked Miss Vance's purse, the brass key ring had more keys than matched what she carried on her person. I'd seen the usual, apartment key, maybe office key, maybe mailbox. But there'd been 3 Longshank industrial jobs on that ring, the kind that opened steel doors on basements or rooftop access on commercial property. Buildings under renovation, for instance. Buildings not yet approved for occupancy. And one of those keys had a tiny plastic tag. On the tag, in neat block pen, was written Barton/4W. At the time I'd filed it mentally under later. Now, later, had shown up in a hat and tapped its watch. Pulley, I said. You still got your boys clogging my front hall, or can we go for a drive? Pulley's eyes narrowed. Why? Because, I said, would like very much to see what's behind a door labeled Barton, 4th floor, west. And if I'm right about what we'll find, you'll get something with teeth for your boss before he starts smashing orchids just to watch us bleed. He studied me a long moment. You could hear the gears. Finally he got up, slow as sunrise. I'll clear it with Kramer, he said. You do that, I said. And tell him I'm trying to hand him a gift-wrapped motive and obstruction charge on Marshfield. He likes those words. They taste like promotions. Chapter 5, Barton Street. By the time we rolled up to Barton Street, it was a little after midnight and the city had that hollow late-hour echo, like a drum someone forgot to stop hitting. Barton was the kind of block that looks fine from a distance and up close smells like damp plaster and cheap paint trying to drown mold. 4-story brick rehab, scaffolding out front, banner bragging about safe, affordable transitional housing, funded by your state in partnership with Marshfield Industrial Materials. No kidding. Pulley parked the unmarked down the block. He didn't ask how I'd known Barton was a street and not, say, a contractor or a pet name. I didn't tell him I'd run building directories in my head on the ride over and Barton had been in the news 2 months ago for a basement boiler leak that sent 2 residents to the ER. You develop hobbies in my line of work. The front door was technically secured with a steel latch and an electronic keypad. Technically. The thing about transitional housing is that the budget goes to signs and press releases, not to locks. I used Miss Vance's Longshank key, and the latch gave up on the first polite try. Inside, the hall light buzzed like a nervous fly. The air smelled of bleach failing to hide rot. "Fourth floor, west," I said. We climbed. The higher we went, the less finished things looked. Second floor at least had baseboards. Third floor had exposed wiring and drywall compound like frosting. Fourth floor, west wing, didn't even bother to lie. Bare studs, bundles of insulation batting stacked against walls, pallets of product wrapped in plastic. This was not move-in ready. This was, we'll make it livable by inspection day if nobody looks too close. Which is, of course, where we looked. "Lights," Pulley muttered. I found a breaker box and flipped a switch. A row of industrial fluorescents coughed awake in segments, throwing hard white across the hall. The west wing was one long unfinished corridor with unit doors labeled in contractor pencil, 4W1, 4W2, etc. Door 4W3 had police seal tape coiled and hanging loose at the jamb, like somebody had put it there for show and never actually sealed the door. "Interesting." "Cute," I said. Pulley grunted. "What do you see?" "I see dressing," I said. "This place has been staged for inspectors, not for tenants." I pointed at a wall. "Look. Fresh insulation stuffed in the cavity where the studs are open. That part looks great. But 3 feet down, behind this sheet of plywood? Nothing. Air gap. You know what that means in January? Frostbite while you sleep." Pulley frowned. So, I said, "Miss Vance's boss bills the state for full thermal remediation, submits compliance reports saying every exterior wall meets code, and then only actually insulates the first 3 vertical feet where a clipboard jockey might poke. The rest of the cavity stays bare. Cheaper for him. Deadly for residents." "Deadly?" "Yeah," I said. "Because cold kills just as fast as heat if you're old, sick, or 4 years old. Also because moisture condenses on those bare cavities, mold blooms, mold gets into lungs, lungs stop doing what lungs are for. And if you're talking post-disaster rehousing, you're already dealing with people who've been breathing smoke or flood muck. They don't have spare lung function lying around." Pulley made a low sound that wasn't words. We pushed into 4W3. The unit was a skeleton. No appliances. Sink not hooked. Wiring looped out of junction boxes like veins. But the main room had a folding table set up under the single working light. On the table, a portable scanner, a laptop, a neat stack of manila folders, and, jackpot, a black zippered portfolio with Vance Consulting Group embossed in silver. Miss Vance had been busy. "I'm gonna pretend I don't see any of this until you tell me I can," Pulley muttered. "Fair," I said. I pulled on gloves. "Yes, I carry them. Yes, mother, I wash my hands," and opened the portfolio. Inside were copies of inspection reports. I say, copies, because each had 2 versions, stapled side by side. On the left, the version submitted to the State Housing Authority, stamped received. On the right, the real version, with red pen in the margins. They did not match. Example, all exterior walls insulated to R19 or better. Red pen, only 0 to 36, insulated. Remainder cavities empty. Tenant risk, significant. Sign-off requires full depth. Do not approve this. Example, all fire doors installed and closing to spec. Red pen, 4W stairwell door missing strike plate. Will not self-latch. This is a fire spread channel. Example, all boilers vented per code. Red pen, carbon monoxide leak detected in B1 mechanical. Levels at 9 ppm after 15 minutes, tenant fatality risk high. Immediate red tag. You get the idea. "So," I said softly, "here's your substance." Pulley leaned in, face tight. You telling me they signed off knowing the boiler could gas people in their sleep? I am telling you Miss Vance wrote tenant fatality risk high in red and somebody still filed all clear with the state, I said. And if a kid dies here, it looks like an accident. Not manslaughter. Not negligent homicide. An accident. Because the paperwork says safe. Police swore, quietly and sincerely. I kept flipping. Tucked in the back was a flash drive labeled Barton full set/final. I held it up. I'm guessing this is digital originals. Scans. Maybe even emails. Bag it, police said immediately. I raised an eyebrow. Bag it for who? For the case, he said. Which case? I said. Yours? Ours? Or are we suddenly on the same page? He shot me a look. You want Kramer kicking down Orchid racks with a warrant? Because that's where we go if he thinks you're playing squirrel with the key evidence. You hand that over, I can get him to holster for a minute. You keep it, I can't. I weighed it. On one hand, leverage is life. On the other, dead women in our house tend to make leverage complicated. Also, if this flash drive really had digital originals, copies existed somewhere else. Miss Vance didn't strike me as the one and only copy type. She struck me as the insurance policy in triplicate type. I handed it to him. He bagged it with the kind of care you usually reserve for engagement rings. All right, he said. Say we prove Marshfield falsified this stuff, put people at risk, bribed whoever needed bribing, and then sent someone to choke his fixer when she started to flip. That still doesn't prove anyone from his shop was in your place tonight. True, I said. But it proves motive. And motive plus opportunity makes Kramer feel cozy about applying pressure to the right throats instead of ours. Pulley nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. And pressure is something we can use. We took photos of the table, the folders, the unfinished walls, the staged insulation. Then we left the unit exactly as we'd found it, minus one flash drive lighter. On the way down, I noticed security cameras in the stairwell. Plastic domes, blinking red. I pointed. You get those feeds, I told Pulley. Tonight. Before anyone at Marshfield Industrial remembers to have a sudden malfunction. He grunted. Already called it in. We hit the street. The air felt colder than before. The banner out front flapped in the faint wind, bragging safe and affordable to an empty block. Archie, Pulley said quietly, you know what this is, right? Yeah, I said. It's murder scale. Not one body. A system. She tried to blow a whistle on the whole setup. And walked into your place, he said. Because she thought we could keep her alive, I said. We stood there in the dark for a long beat, both of us listening to the city breathe. Finally Pulley cleared his throat. I'll get this to Kramer, he said. You head home. Don't talk to anyone that ain't us. And if Marshfield tries to reach you, you record every syllable. If Marshfield tries to reach me, I said, I'll invite him over for beer. Pulley looked at me. You serious? Absolutely, I said. Because if he walks through our front door right now like he owns the block, then we really know how scared he is. Pulley shook his head like I'd suggested we juggle grenades and climbed into the car. Me? I went to find a cab. I had a feeling sleep wasn't on tonight's menu. Chapter 6, The Man with Polished Cuffs. When I got back to the brownstone, the first thing I noticed was the smell, coffee, thyme, lemon zest. Fritz copes with stress by feeding it. The second thing I noticed was the voice in the office that didn't belong to anyone on payroll. Deeply unfortunate, the voice was saying. Tragic. Unforeseeable. But let's not indulge hysteria. I walked in. He was planted in his oversized chair behind the big desk like a mountain range, looking neither impressed nor pleased. Across from him, in my chair, sat a man who made expensive look like a cent. Silver hair arranged like a campaign poster. Cufflinks you could probably use as down payments. Jaw like an architect's model. Eyes pale and calm, the way ice is calm before you step on it. Charles R. Marshfield, in the flesh. I shut the door behind me and leaned on it. Evening, I said. Office is closed, but we do offer after-hours service for valued guests. The pale eyes slid to me. He smiled. It was a good smile, technically. Lots of teeth, no sincerity. And you must be Mr. Goodwin, he said. I've heard of you. I'm flattered, I said. You're sitting where I put my feet, so you'll understand if I'm not at my warmest. He chuckled, the way men chuckle in country clubs. I appreciate directness, he said. We're all men of the world here. That's so, I said. Mr. Marshfield, he said smoothly, was just explaining his position, he added, without looking at me. Were you? I said to the cuffs. I was, Marshfield said. He steepled his hands, making sure I could see the watch that probably had a name. I came, of course, the moment I heard of poor Lillian's situation. I considered it my responsibility. She had done some consulting work for us in the past, and though she had recently grown, shall we say, erratic, I still feel a certain, well, duty of care. Duty of care, I repeated. Interesting phrase. Most people go with alibi. His smile never flickered. May I speak plainly? Please, I said. Decorate the place. Lillian was troubled, he said. Brilliant with data, certainly. Thorough. But also dramatic, impulsive, and inclined toward fantasy when stressed. She'd convinced herself that routine variances and minor compliance delays were evidence of some grand conspiracy. She was threatening to go public with what she called proof of malfeasance. In fact, what she had were drafts. Internal notes. Preliminary hazard assessments from early-stage walkthroughs that, naturally, are corrected before final sign-off. The usual sausage-making of any large project. She was going to wave those drafts around and shout murder. He spread his hands. You can imagine my concern. Yes, I said. You were concerned she'd cost you money. He gave a soft laugh. We all answer to investors, Mr. Goodwin. And regulators, I said. But of course, he said smoothly. And we're in perfect compliance. Which is why I came tonight. Because I am outraged, that she would drag your household into her delusions. To show up uninvited, to expire in such a dramatic manner, leaving you entangled in her paranoia, well. I can't allow that. I want you gentlemen to know, unequivocally, that I understand the position you've been placed in. I intend to support you in clearing your names. How generous, I said. You bring flowers? His smile thinned by a molecule. I bring discretion, he said. Which, in my experience, is more valuable. He turned his gaze back to the man in the chair. Here is what I propose. We all agree that Lillian was distraught, unstable, making wild accusations. She came here without invitation, spun lurid fantasies, and unfortunately suffered some kind of episode. You were upstairs with your, plants. Your assistant was elsewhere in the house. She must have fallen, struck something, asphyxiated. A tragic accident. But an accident. No lurid theories. No grand plots. No reason for anyone to dig where digging would embarrass everyone. He smiled again, wide. This protects you. It protects me. It protects the very people Lillian claimed to care about. Because the last thing displaced families need right now is a media circus about imaginary safety risks in perfectly safe transitional housing, wouldn't you agree? I looked at him. He looked at Marshfield. For a moment, the room held nothing but that look. I've seen that look melt men. I've seen it carve them like roast. Marshfield, to his credit, held eye contact. But I saw something flicker in the pale ice under the polish. Just a twitch. Just long enough to tell me that whatever he'd been expecting to find when he walked in, it wasn't this particular temperature. "Mr. Marshfield," he said at last, voice like velvet over stone, "allow me to clarify." "Of course," Marshfield purred. "You believe," he said, "that you can stroll into my home at midnight after one of your subordinates has been strangled under my roof, and instruct me to endorse a narrative that absolves you of liability, hamstrings the police investigation, and invites me to perjure myself in any subsequent proceeding." Marshfield blinked. "Now, I wouldn't, perjury is such a—" "Silence," he said. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. Marshfield actually shut his mouth. I'll give him that, he recognized a cliff edge when his toes curled over it. He continued, still mild. "You propose this, in part, by insulting Miss Vance's mental stability. You describe her as fanciful, unreliable, hysterical. You are perhaps unaware that you thereby insult my intelligence." I had, in the brief interval before her murder, ample opportunity to observe Miss Vance. She was frightened. She was angry. She was also lucid, coherent, and in full possession of a meticulous and well-organized mind. She presented not the ravings of a paranoiac but the fury of a competent professional whose tolerance for your abuses had reached its terminus. Marshfield's smile was getting costly to maintain. "And," he went on, "you presume, this is the richest morsel, that you can support us in clearing our names." "Pfui. My name does not require your support. Your name, Mr. Marshfield, is currently being dragged toward an abyss by your own avarice. If it is to be salvaged, it will not be by me." "Sir," Marshfield said tightly, "I think you may be underestimating." "No," came the answer, very softly. "I am not underestimating you. I am categorizing you." Now, personally, I would have applauded, but the tone in the room said applause would cheapen it. "Archie," he said. "Here," I said. "Kindly inform Mr. Marshfield what we discovered at Barton Street," he said. Marshfield's head snapped toward me. "Excuse me?" "With pleasure," I said. "We visited a property of yours tonight. Barton Street. Transitional housing with your banner outside. We found an unfinished unit on the 4th floor west set up as Miss Vance's command post. Copies of your inspection reports. 2 versions apiece. The real ones with big red warnings about carbon monoxide and fire doors and uninsulated exterior walls that could freeze tenants, or cook them. And the fake ones that got filed with the state saying everything was sunshine and roses." Marshfield's face had gone still in that way rich men go still when they're deciding whether to bribe you or ruin you. "Also," I said, "we collected digital files. Originals. Time-stamped. With author metadata. Guess whose name shows up approving final submissions after Miss Vance marked tenant fatality risk high? I'll give you a hint, it rhymes with Marshfield." He inhaled through his nose. "So," I said cheerfully, "if you're planning to argue in court that she was an unhinged fantasist making things up, I suggest you first explain why her unhinged fantasies happen to match internal documents signed by you, sir. With dates." For a second, nobody breathed. Then Marshfield leaned back, laced his fingers, and smiled. Only this time the smile didn't reach anything. "I see," he said softly. "Do you?" I said. "Yes," he said. "I see that I've walked into a frame." That was not the line I'd expected. I glanced at him. His eyes narrowed by a hair, telling me he hadn't expected it either. A frame, Marshfield repeated smoothly. A very elegant one. I admire the craft. You two have a reputation for creative leverage. So let's consider this possibility instead. My former consultant, nursing a grudge after parting ways with my company, decides to extort me. She forges alternate versions of legitimate reports, complete with lurid language. She invents a narrative of danger. She plans to threaten me with these fabrications unless I pay to suppress them. She arranges to meet me here, neutral ground, as she would style it. Unfortunately, before she can complete her scheme, she dies in your home. And now, curiously, you produce so-called evidence of my wrongdoing. Evidence you claim to have collected from a building I supposedly manage, where you trespassed tonight with the help of, what, a stolen key. He spread his hands, palms up. Gentlemen. Come now. It's transparent. I laughed. I couldn't help it. You're really going with that? It's cleaner than the truth, he said pleasantly. We both looked at him. The truth, Marshfield continued, is that none of this matters. Not in the way you think. You can drag my name through whatever ink you like. You can parade fabricated memos and breathless accusations. What you cannot do is survive open war with me. You think you can. You can't. I have friends you do not even know exist. I have resources you cannot fathom. I can tie you in litigation until you are begging to auction these orchids for legal fees. I can leak stories to papers about your methods. I can have politicians at press conferences calling you obstructionists, profiteers, exploiters of tragedy. By the time I am done, the phrase material witness will sound like criminal conspirator when it's attached to you. His smile sharpened. And if you're very unlucky, someone will decide you should be held overnight. Without your gourmet dinners. He leaned in. So here is what will actually happen. You will say nothing further about me to the police. You will characterize Lillian as unstable. You will express grief, outrage, blah blah. And then you will go quietly back to your little games while I resume my work. He stood. Because, to be frank, gentlemen, I am untouchable. He started for the door. I moved to block him. Archie, he said mildly. Yeah. Don't, he said. I'm not stopping you, I said. I just want to enjoy this angle when you walk out and discover Inspector Kramer listening in the hall. For the first time all evening, Charles Marshfield actually lost his expression. The door swung open. Kramer filled the frame like an indictment. Pulley was behind him, holding an evidence bag. Inside the bag, catching the light like a guilty conscience, was the flash drive from Barton Street. Hello, Charlie, Kramer said. Funny running into you here. Chapter 7, Pressure Points. You ever watch a very expensive dam sprout a hairline crack? You don't hear an explosion. You hear a polite pop, like a champagne cork 3 rooms over. That was the sound Marshfield made when he saw Kramer holding that bag. For about 2 seconds, nobody said anything. Then Kramer smiled. I have seen that smile maybe 4 times. It is not built for comfort. Well, Kramer said. I was on my way over anyway, seeing as how one of your consultants got herself strangled in this house tonight and your name came up more than once. Imagine my surprise when Pulley calls and says, hey boss, guess who rolled up to the brownstone on his own like Santa Claus with a sack full of motive. Marshfield adjusted his cuffs, slow and deliberate. Inspector. Always a pleasure. Wish I could say the same, Kramer said. He walked in, shut the door behind him, and leaned against it, effectively sealing us all in. Now. Before we proceed, you got counsel in the building already, Chuck? Because if not, I can call you a nice public defender. They're underpaid but they've got heart. That won't be necessary, Marshfield said tightly. Suit yourself, Kramer said. He waggled the bag. Here's the situation. We've got a dead woman, name of Lillian Vance, with finger marks on her neck. We've got contemporaneous notes alleging your company is rubber-stamping death traps as safe housing. We've got digital files dated and timestamped that look a hell of a lot like original reports with your signature lines. We've got motive out the ears. We've got you physically present at the residence of the last man she visited alive, approximately 1 hour after said death, trying to shape the narrative. You know what that smells like to me? This is absurd, Marshfield said. It smells like consciousness of guilt, Kramer went on, conversational. Juries love that phrase. Marshfield lifted his chin. Inspector, I understand the position you're in. You have to posture. You have to look aggressive. But let's keep this proportionate. A disturbed woman fabricated documents to extort me. She then fled here, panicked, and suffered some catastrophic event. That's tragic. I'm devastated. But it is not my fault. And it is not cause to smear my reputation with wild allegations. Kramer said. Wild. Furthermore, Marshfield said, warming up, if you attempt to weaponize unverified internal drafts and stolen property to suggest criminal negligence on my part, I assure you my attorneys will file so many injunctions your grandchildren will still be answering them. And if you even hint at accusing me of involvement in physical violence, I will personally see to it that every relevant oversight board in this city audits every case file you've touched in 10 years. Do I make myself clear? Kramer stared at him. Then Kramer laughed. It wasn't friendly. Chuck, he said softly, you are not in Albany right now bullying procurement subcommittees. You are in my world. And in my world, you just waltzed into a homicide scene and tried to tamper with witnesses. You think I'm worried about paperwork? Buddy, I salivate over paperwork. Paperwork's how I get promoted. He nodded at Pulley. Read him in. Pulley, bless him, had been waiting his whole career for that cue. He started, slow and steady, on rights. Marshfield's eyes went wide. Hold on, Marshfield snapped. You can't, this is outrageous. I am here voluntarily. You were, Kramer said. Now you're here officially. Marshfield pointed at us. They set this up. They're conspiring to. Careful, I said. Conspiracy's a big word. You might sprain it. Shut up, Goodwin, Kramer muttered, without heat. Marshfield inhaled like he was about to blow the plaster off the walls. Then the polish came back on like a mask being reapplied. All right, he said evenly. All right. Let's dispense with theater. You can posture. You can even book me, if that's the circus you want. But you and I both know you don't have me on the physical act. I was nowhere near this house at 4 o'clock. You've got no prints upstairs but hers and theirs. You've got no witness who saw me or any of my men enter. You've got nothing that ties anyone on my payroll to hands on her throat. So unless you're planning to argue I materialized like a ghost and did it myself, you're bluffing. Kramer smiled again. Nope, he said. Not bluffing. Just patient. Marshfield frowned a fraction. Meaning? Meaning, Kramer said, sometimes you don't need the trigger man first. Sometimes you start with obstruction, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, false statements to law enforcement, and negligent homicide, and then you squeeze. You know squeezing, right, Chuck? You look like a man who's squeezed people. A muscle jumped in Marshfield's jaw. See, Kramer went on, negligent homicide's a cute one. The DA's office loves it for guys like you. All this Barton Street stuff? He held up the bag. If a DA decides, strictly hypothetically, you understand, that your willful sign-off on unsafe occupancy constitutes reckless disregard for human life, and if, again hypothetically, we can tie any tenant injury or fatality to that disregard, suddenly we're not talking about civil liability. We're talking about you in a courtroom while 12 citizens decide whether you get to keep your cufflinks. Marshfield's voice went cold. This is blackmail. This is leverage, Kramer said. And I learned from the best. He jerked his head toward the man in the chair. That, I admit, almost made me laugh out loud. Marshfield looked from Kramer to him to me and back again. He was recalculating. You could see the numbers scroll behind his eyes. Finally, he exhaled, slow. What, he said quietly, exactly are you proposing? Kramer shrugged. Simple. You're gonna give me a name. Marshfield's brows lifted. A name. The name, Kramer said, of the guy who put hands on Lillian Vance. Marshfield held still. You're gonna tell me, Kramer continued, who does your enforcement? Who shows up when someone like Lillian gets restless? Who handles situations? You're gonna tell me where he was at 4 p.m. You're gonna tell me what you told him to do. You are gonna tell me that, on paper, you explicitly instructed him not to lay a finger on the lady, so that when he gets nailed for murder you get to look shocked in court. You follow? Marshfield stared. You think I think, Kramer said, you're smart. And smart men delegate. So. Name. Silence stretched. I could feel Fritz hovering in the hall outside the closed door like a nervous saint. Upstairs, in the plant rooms, air was still being pumped across thousands of dollars worth of pedals that did not care about politics. The city hummed beyond the windows. Time waited. Finally, very softly, Marshfield spoke. Albert Rigo, he said. Kramer didn't move. Spell it. Rigo, Marshfield said. His voice had lost most of its marble. He's security. Contract. Independent. I use him when situations arise. I told him, explicitly, that Ms. Vance was to be watched. Only watched. To make sure she didn't do anything reckless, you understand. I was worried for her safety. She'd been frantic lately. I told him under no circumstances was there to be any physical. Yeah, Kramer said. His eyes glittered. Address. Marshfield swallowed. He keeps a room over Angelo's garage on 49th, near the river. 3rd floor. Door at the back. You'll smell it before you see it. Kramer nodded once. Pulley? On it, Pulley said, already jotting. And Chuck, Kramer added, almost pleasantly, if this Rigo character ain't where you said, or if he's already on a bus to Florida, or if I so much as hear the word lawyer in his vicinity before my boys say hello, I am dropping the full negligent homicide packet on the DA's desk at 8 a.m. with a little bow and a note that says, for immediate press conference. You tracking me? Marshfield's mouth was a flat line. Yes, he muttered. Good, Kramer said. Because that packet's got copies of Miss Vance's little red notes. Including the one about carbon monoxide. The one where she wrote tenant fatality risk high. You know how that's gonna play on TV when the anchor says it out loud? Real sympathetic. Marshfield closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, the polish was back, but duller now. Inspector, he said carefully, in the spirit of cooperation, I trust we can agree that my presence here tonight was motivated solely by concern. I came to offer assistance. I should not be portrayed as. Kramer barked a laugh. Chuck. Buddy. There is not enough lipstick in Manhattan to pretty this pig. You're leaving here in Pulley's car. Quietly, if you're smart. Loud if you force me. You're gonna sit somewhere nice and answer some questions. You're gonna stay available. At the end, maybe you walk. Maybe you don't. But either way, we are done playing untouchable. Marshfield looked like a man chewing tinfoil. But he nodded. Fine, he said. Excellent, Kramer said. Let's move. Pulley opened the door. Marshfield stood, smoothed his jacket, and looked at us for one last polished second. This isn't over, he murmured. I smiled. That's the point. They left. The door shut. Silence landed like a blanket. After a long pause, I let out a breath I hadn't admitted I was holding. Well, I said. That was festive. He didn't answer right away. His eyes were closed, head back, fingers steepled at his chin. Finally he said, Archie. Yeah. Albert Rigo, he said. Find him before Kramer does. Chapter 8, The Weight of Silence. When your employer, who has just witnessed a homicide in his greenhouse, outmaneuvered a construction baron, and baited homicide into doing his legwork, tells you to outrun the police to a suspect, you don't argue about civil liberties. You get your hat. I was at the door by instinct, but I stopped. Not because I doubted the order. Because of the way he'd said it. He hadn't said it the usual way, calm, dry, faintly irritated that the universe required his involvement. He'd said it like something was heavy on his chest. Something beyond orchids, beyond leverage, beyond the usual chess match with Kramer. That caught me. Before I sprint into a garage on 49th to chat up a man who strangles women for money, I said, you want to tell me why we're racing instead of letting Kramer earn his pension? His eyelids opened, slow. He looked at me. I require information, he said. Yeah, I guessed, I said. Information about what? Sequence, he said. I waited. He sighed. Miss Vance, he said quietly, was killed in my house. The brute who did it will, in all likelihood, be convicted on the strength of his fingerprints, his employer's betrayal, and his own stupidity. I have no interest in his motivations. I am interested in hers. I frowned. Hers? She made a decision, he said. At 3:58 this afternoon, she climbed my steps. She believed that choice would preserve her life. She believed I would preserve her life. She was incorrect. I do not accept that. I opened my mouth, then shut it. He almost never uses first person like that. It wasn't ego. It was responsibility, and it sat on him like an anvil. He went on. I must know precisely when Albert Rigo entered this house. I must know whether Miss Vance permitted him entry. I must know whether she recognized him, trusted him, believed she could still negotiate. If she did, if she thought, even for an instant, that I could not or would not protect her, I must understand why. He looked at me, eyes steady. That, Archie, is why you are going to find Mr. Rigo before Inspector Kramer reduces him to a bargaining chip. You will ask Mr. Rigo questions. You will extract answers. You will, ideally, keep him ambulatory. I am not finished with him. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. Message received. Good, he murmured. I headed for the door again, but paused with my hand on the knob. One thing. Yes? This wasn't your fault, I said. He shut his eyes again. Pfui, he said softly. Which, translated from his dialect, meant, do not insult me with comfort. Fair enough. I left. Angelo's garage on 49th wasn't really Angelo's anymore. Angelo had probably been dead since the Nixon years. But the sign stayed, because men like Albert Rigo like places that pretend to be grandfathered into the neighborhood's bloodstream. The garage itself squatted under the elevated like a toad, grease, gasoline, and the metallic bark of tools. Round the back, a steel door climbed to a narrow stairwell that smelled like cigarettes, cheap bourbon, and last week's fear. I climbed. Third floor, like Marshfield said. End of the hall. A warped door with peeling gray paint and a new lock. New is interesting in a place that hasn't seen paint since disco. I listened first. You only survive this job if you listen first. Inside, faint movement. A man's weight shifting in a chair. Low mutter of TV. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, cheerier. Candygram. Floorboards creaked. A voice came through the door, rough and full of gravel. Who's that? Maintenance, I said. We got a complaint about strangling noises. City ordinance, you understand. Silence. Then, beat it. Which, of course, confirmed it was Rigo. People who aren't guilty open the door to argue. People who are guilty try to end the conversation. I leaned close enough for my lips to almost touch the wood. Albert, I said softly, we can do this private and polite, with nobody bruised and nobody booked yet, or we can wait 45 seconds and let Inspector Kramer knock with a warrant and 3 uniforms who think reasonable force means dent first, ask later. Decide fast. A beat. The lock clicked. The door opened 3 inches on a chain. One bloodshot eye glared out at me from a face that had been rearranged for a living. Nose flattened twice, scar along the cheekbone, jaw like a brick. He smelled like old sweat and canned stew. Who the hell are you? He growled. Goodwin, I said. The guy whose boss you embarrassed. He squinted. What? You walked into our house and killed a woman under our nose, I said. That's not just murder. That's personal disrespect. You see how that's a separate category? His brow twitched. Confusion is an opening. I drove my shoulder into the door. The chain popped like thread. He stumbled back, cursing, and went for his belt. I already had my gun out. Nope, I said. Hands where I can admire them, Al. He froze, then slowly lifted his hands. Palms like shovels. Fingers thick. You could imagine them closing around a throat and not letting go. The room behind him was what you'd expect, mattress on the floor, 2 chairs, TV with rabbit ears, ashtray overflowing, gym bag in the corner. There was also a duffel half-zipped on the mattress, stuffed with clothes, cash, and a bus ticket. Destination, Miami. Smart, I said. Son, surf, extradition. He glared. You a cop? Worse, I said. I'm the guy she came to for help. That landed. He swallowed. Look, he said. I didn't mean, this got out of hand. I was just supposed to talk to her. Just talk. She starts screaming, clawing, I'm trying to shut her up, next thing. Careful, I said. You're about to confess to a homicide you haven't been Mirandized for. I'm not here for that. He blinked. You're not. No, I said. I'm here for logistics. Timeline. Who let you in? Who she thought you were? You answer clean, maybe I leave you upright when Kramer arrives. You stall, I yell gun, out the window and you spend the next 15 minutes tasting plaster. Up to you. His jaw worked. You'll still give me to the cops. Absolutely, I said. But with a narrative that maybe keeps you off death row and lands you something with bars and 3 meals. Or, if you annoy me, with a narrative that makes you look like you enjoyed it. I'm generous that way. He stared. Then he nodded once, fast. Okay. Okay. Ask. Start with this, I said. How'd you get in the house? Back door, he muttered. Kitchen. The cook was in the pantry or something. Door wasn't deadbolt. I been in before. Knew the way. That made something cold run down my spine. You'd been in before, I repeated. When? He licked his lips. Couple months back. Boss had me sit in a car out front while he went in for a consult. Said if anything funny happened I come in and fetch him. So I ran the route. Back door, up the hall, stairs to the greenhouse level. Boss said never go past the door with the glass unless I had to. I said. So tonight you just strollin' like you own the lease. He winced. She called me. My eyebrows went up. Who called you? The girl, he said. Lillian. She called me. Said she was going to the fat man's place, her words, not mine, and that I should meet her there. Said we could work it out. Said she knew I was reasonable. I let that sit a second. She invited you, I said quietly. He nodded miserably. Yeah. I told her boss wanted her to calm down, hand over the files, nobody gets hurt. She said she'd only hand if he promised no more death traps, her words. She said she'd talk to me, 'cause she didn't trust him no more. But she thought I was decent. I ain't decent, man. I ain't never said I was decent. I breathed out slow. Go on, I said. So I go in the back, he said. I go up. She's in that jungle room, pacing, talking a mile a minute about kids choking on gas, old ladies freezing, numbers, inspectors, everything. She's worked up. I tell her, listen, just gimme the stuff, we'll square you away, nobody gotta get hurt. She says, not till I see in writing. I say I ain't got authority. She starts yelling about how she'll blow it all up, how she'll go to the feds, how she'll call news. She's loud, man. Real loud. I hear somebody in the hall. I panic. I grab her, just to cover her mouth. She bites me. He held up his hand, there was a crescent of broken skin on the meat of his thumb. I squeeze. She's fighting, I'm trying to shut her up, and then she just goes. His eyes darted. I swear to God, I didn't mean to take it that far. I just needed her quiet till whoever was in the hall moved on. Who was in the hall, I said. He shook his head. Didn't see. Heard steps. Heavy steps going away. Maybe up. Maybe down. I dunno. I ain't stick around to greet M. Soon as she dropped, I bolted. Door was still cracked. I was gone in like 5 seconds. That's it. I watched him. He wasn't smart, but he wasn't lying. The sweat, the swallow rhythm, the way his eyes slid when he made himself the victim but locked when he blamed his nerves, those all rang true. An accidental kill is still a kill, and panic leaves fingerprints all over a man's voice. One piece, though, burned in my head like a fuse, she called him. She invited him. She trusted him more than she trusted our ability to hold the fort alone. And she'd yelled loud enough to be heard. Time, I said. What time did she call you? Like, 3:30, he said. Said, meet me there at 4 sharp. Arrival? I hit the back door maybe 4:05, he said. Wasn't more than 2-3 minutes with her before it happened. Which fit our window. Okay, I said softly. Okay, Al. You did good. He blinked. That's it? For you, I said. For her, it's not nearly it. I walked to the window overlooking the alley and stuck my head out. The unmarked sedan had just pulled in. Pulley got out first, heavy and certain. Behind him, 2 uniforms. Hey, Pulley, I called. His head snapped up. Goodwin, you idiot, get away from that. Relax, I said. Your guy's here. He's awake. He's cooperative. He's got a bite mark and a story you're gonna love. Bring cuffs and a recorder. Oh, and tell Kramer something for me, would you? Pulley squinted. Make it fast. Tell him, I said, we're square for tonight. But if anybody breathes on a single orchid without a warrant signed in triplicate, we go back to war. Police snorted. Copy that. I turned back to Rigo. He'd sunk onto the chair, shoulders slumped, hands hanging like heavy tools. He looked smaller now. Not harmless. Never harmless. But smaller. Albert, I said. He looked up, wary. I'm not promising you mercy, I said. That's above my pay grade. But I'll say this much, your boss just sold you faster than yesterday's paper. You owe him nothing from here on. Rigo laughed once, bitter. Ain't that always the way, he muttered. The uniforms tromped up the stairs. I stepped aside. They came in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Rigo lifted his hands and didn't fight. I holstered my gun and slipped out into the hall before they finished the chorus. I'd given Kramer his trigger man, and I'd gotten what we needed. On the walk back to the street, I let the night air fill my lungs. It tasted like oil, rust, and the faint sweetness of freedom. Partial, temporary freedom, but in our line, you take what you can get. I hailed a cab and leaned back in the seat, watching the city roll by in neon slices. Here's the thing. Cases end. Paperwork gets filed. Men like Kramer hold press conferences. Men like Marshfield hire new lawyers and start spinning. Men like Rigo take pleas. Miss Vance gets a burial and maybe a paragraph on page 2 if Lon's in a generous mood. But not all endings are neat. There was still the question he'd asked, why she believed we could save her and why she'd reached for Rigo anyway. I didn't have that answer yet. Maybe I never would. Maybe the only person who could have told us now lay on a slab downtown with ink on her fingertips. But I knew this much. Marshfield wasn't untouchable anymore. And upstairs, back on 35th Street, under humid lights and careful hands, the orchids would still open in the morning, perfect and indifferent, while the man in the big chair began planning exactly how to make sure nobody ever again mistook his house for a hunting ground.